We were introduced to Sasha Havlicek in the first segment of the night. She is a leading expert in global counter-extremism and is the founding CEO of the Institute for Strategic Dialogue. Welcome, Sasha. Next is Jelani Cobb. He's an award-winning author and professor who frequently writes about race, politics, history, and culture. Jelani, thank you for joining us today. Will Packer is a wildly successful film and TV producer and a motivational speaker. In 2017, Will's movie Girls Trip was the first film written, directed, produced, and starring African Americans to gross over $100 million. Will, welcome to our panel. And Brandon Marshall rounds out our panel. He is an NFL Super Bowl champion and was one of the early players to take a knee before games when the Star-Spangled Banner was played. Brandon, welcome to the conversation as well. The last episode explored some of history's worst crimes against humanity and the role of individuals in these events. Jelani, I'll start with you. United States history has been shaped by the genocide of Native people and crimes against humanity against Black and brown people. How does this legacy affect us today?
Well, that legacy, first off, thank you for the question. Thank you for moderating this important discussion. But the fact of the matter is that history shapes everything about contemporary America. We can't escape it. It's implicit within the Constitution, which made provisions for the protection of the slave trade. It's implicit within the bloodiest war that the United States ever fought, the Civil War, was over this question of who would be counted as a human being, who would be included within the protections of democracy. And so at every turn that we see, we can't escape history. And so it's easy to look at what happened with George Floyd and think of that as a singular event that was sparked by a particularly outrageous act by 4 police officers. But the fact of the matter is that this has been definitive of our relationship with law enforcement for as long as we've had a relationship with law enforcement. And so in the broad scope of history, this is kind of yet another iteration of a dynamic that we've seen again and again and again.
Sasha, let me bring you in. You've been monitoring and studying extremist movements for years now. Why have hateful ideologies like white supremacy become so visible and destructive in recent years? Where do these hateful beliefs, I think also many people want to know, where do they come from? Are they taught in the home? Are they natural to some people? How do you explain it?
Thank you, Tamron. I've been watching all forms of extremism since 2006, and what always amazed me in over a sort of decade period was how many people, how many government officials, how many foundations, how many people said to me, why are you working on the extreme and far right? Stick to your work on the Islamist problem. That's the big threat of our time. Why would you be stretching yourselves? And it was just an extraordinary blind spot, and perhaps a purposeful blind spot. Nobody really wanted to touch it. And having spent a decade dealing with the aftermath of genocide and war in Yugoslavia, where my family is from, when you've seen this, what happens when ethno-nationalism becomes normalized. And that dehumanization that Jelani was talking about is so significant. And we have seen an absolutely significant growth in these movements, including white supremacy over the last decade. It doesn't happen by accident. Many people assume these movements somehow grow organically. There has been a big investment in these movements, and their aim has been to mainstream, to go beyond that hardcore, and to start to normalize that othering mindset, that dehumanization of outgroups as they define them. And they have clear political ambitions. And the result of that is palpable. We see the rise of populist and xenophobic parties at the ballot box all around the world today, and a shift in public discourse that is palpable.